and effective hiring, which will be presented by Vaibhav Ranaware. He's a management consultant from Proactive Corporate Services Private Limited. Before we begin with the webinar, I'd like to introduce Sourcing ADDA for those of you who are new to the Sourcing ADDA platform. Sourcing ADDA is a community for recruiters, sourcers, and talent acquisition professionals to come together to discuss new techniques and trends in the recruitment industry. At Sourcing ADDA, we conduct various activities such as tweet chats, meetups, webinars, and sourcing contests. And our most excited annual event, that is TaskCon 16, is going to be starting. So basically, it's a unique conference designed by recruiters for recruiters. It will be held on the 14th of April, and it's a great opportunity to add to your knowledge. So if you haven't already registered for TaskCon, please do it fast, as we have limited seats. So yeah, you can follow us at Twitter, Facebook for updates to TaskCon and all the other activities that we keep having. So coming back to the webinar, that is micromessaging and employer branding and effective hiring. Over to you, Vaibhav.
Okay. Hi, welcome guys, and thank you Sourcing ADDA for giving me an opportunity first. To give you a brief about myself, I am a hardcore recruiter with 11 years experience. I have my PG from Wellington and one more PG from University of Mumbai. Throughout, I have been in talent acquisition and employee engagement. I've done hiring largely for middle and senior level. So that's it about me. We'll move on to the presentation using micromessaging for effective hiring and employer branding basically. So first, there are the contents of a program. What is the micromessaging we will go through? What are the types and what is an impact of a micromessage we have? And then we will understand what are the elements of micromessage, what are the drawbacks we have of micro inequities, which is a part of micromessage, and how to use MicroAdvantages, which is a positive side of micromessage for employer branding and effective hiring, and what are the rewards of MicroAdvantages. So moving on to the next slide, what is micromessage? A micromessage is basically a subtle and sometimes not so subtle verbal message that people send through a body language or a tone of voice or the way they impact the world. The micromessage is basically an signal, I would say an immediate feeling what we would like to convey. So when we speak, it is basically about what exactly you would like to convey. The words may be like, I really appreciate you, but the way you are saying it, or your body language or your eye contacts, which is not there at that point of time, which means that you really don't appreciate it. So there are few small messages which are beyond the words which we are sending, or it can be a body language, or as I said, it is a tone of voice, or we are not using inappropriate words. That's how we send in micro message. So it can be positive or it can be negative. So we'll understand what are the types of micro messages to go further. So there are two types of micro message. One is called as micro advantages or micro affirmations when you talk about positive messaging, and second is called as micro inequities, which is called as a negative impact. So micro advantages is basically a subtle impact, subtle responses or messages which have high impact, or the words which are high impact words where you say you have done a great job with a voice which is high pitching voice and the body language which speaks. So what micro advantages is a positive body language, a tone of voice with a proper affirmation set of words. And what is micro inequities or a microaggression is a negative stuff where we talk about it's basically seemingly response which is harmful basically, or the comments which are indirectly harming to an individual, or it can basically cause a performance of an individual to go down, or these are sometimes unintentional or sometimes they are intentional. Like you're gazing at somebody and saying, okay, you're not doing a great job, with the words which are very powerful, like with a tone which is high in volume and a tone which is frustrating tone, would cause an individual to think about his performers, or he can basically go down and his performance will go down basically. So what are the micro reasons for micro inequities? Basically we'll understand here. So micro inequities can cause because of age, race, ethnic, disability, performance, religion, gender, style, function, culture, anything. Basically, it has to do, for example, in India, you say, people from South will not talk to people from North, or even in an interior culture, within South, they'll have 10 other cultures, or within North, you'll have 10 other cultures. So people are different. So they are treated in different manner. Again, coming back to the region and country, they'll have a different opinion or the way of looking at the people. Like you go to US, the Asians are looked in a different manner. So these are some reasons why micro inequities take place. So moving on further, how does it impact a performance of an individual or an employee? So if you talk about micro affirmations, these are the high impact messages which helps an individual to build. For example, if a manager truly appreciate an employee, what impact would have on his performance? That is like an employee would have a positive set of mind, he will be engaged, he'll be encouraged, he'll be self-motivated, he'll be efficient and committed toward the task, he will be a team player, and there will be a better understanding. And there will not be any communication gap in a project or a process or in an organization. So what happens if there are micro inequities, like employees are not appreciated, or you send certain messages which are impacting. So for example, I say, okay, I feel you have done a good job, but you can improve on it. I'm not making an eye contact, or nor am I making and basically looking at the person, or my hand gestures is basically pointing at him. So it gives a negative impact, that even though that individual had tried best, but the manager is not appreciating it. So what would happen in that case? You are sending in micro inequities, which would cause a communication gap. The individuals would be a spectators at a meeting, or they'll be selfish. You'll have inefficient and uncommitted people working around you. They'll be discouraged, they'll be demotivated, they will not be engaged people, and what we'll have around is a negativity. So it impacts performance of an individual as well as an organization. So if whenever we are sending any micro message, we need to understand that they have a high impact. So in a day, we roughly send anything between 2 to 5,000 micro messages. So no matter how and what kind of words you're using, but how are you using it and what kind of body language you have behind it is really an important. So I'll just tell you a story. How do we send micro messages in an organization? So what happens? We have a new joinee called Viru, who has joined an organization, and he has completed his induction program of 1.5 days, and he's all pumped up to work with a team. So he meets his manager, who's having conversation with his colleague. So manager asks him to wait for some time. So this guy is waiting, and the manager is having some important conversation. After a while, that conversation, a professional conversation, turns into the personal conversation, where they're discussing holidays or tour plans and what is family doing and all. And this guy is still ignored there. He's sitting there. So he reminds the manager that I am there. So once the manager gets alerts, he finds, okay, fine, I have to go. So he takes this guy along with him for a meeting. He says, okay, we have a meeting. We have to go for a meeting. Let's go. So this guy is going to a meeting. When he enters the lobby, he enters the conference room, I'm sorry, he finds all these guys are sitting here, Jai, Ravi, Sri, Krish, Shafi, and Rita. So manager, keeps his hand on the shoulder of Jai and they gossip something, have a gig, and the meeting continues. The meeting is all about how can we improve employee engagement. So it starts with Rita where she says, okay, we should have a plan of proper outdoor events where we should call celebrities, and we should do ABC things, which would be like planning entire event in a proper manner. We should have an outdoor activities, and we'll have some celebrity who would speak for it. Moving on, the manager does not show any interest. He said, okay, okay, great. This is the kind of words which managers is using. Okay, okay, great. And he tries to cut her off, and he asks any other suggestion. So our new guy, Vidu, who's new enthusiast employee, he gets up from his chair and he says, okay, I would like to contribute. So manager says, okay, come on, new guy, tell me what you have in mind. So he says, yes, we should have an employee satisfaction survey first before going on to anything. And we should understand what is employee feeling about an organization, and then we can plan an event accordingly. So this is what Viru says. Employee who's newly joined, manager looks at him uh, with a neutral face and says, okay, okay. And he waves hands towards him and asks him to sit down. Moving on to the next guys, Shafi and Chris, they never contribute to the discussion. They just would back whatever X and Y would say. So they are just participants. They are, we can say they are just a spectator for that meeting. So Shri says, whatever Rita says, I agree with it and we should move on with that. Ravi does not have any opinion to make. So moving on to Jai, manager asks, what do you feel we should be doing? So Jai says, okay, we should have first a survey where, we should understand what employee wants, and then we should plan for an event where we'll have lots of outdoor activities, and we can plan for some event, and where we'll have at the end some celebrity would speak, which would help us to engage our employees and would boost their morale as well. So this is what the conversation happens. Manager is happy with the Jai's suggestion. He says, he gives him go ahead of a project and he gives him thumbs up. He pats on his back. He said, wow, good idea, great job. This is what the manager has done so far. So meeting ends on this note. Moving on to the next slide. We would understand after this story, what do you think are the elements? I want here I want to understand what you guys think are the elements of a micro message. So if you guys could type in this chat box, which is there on the right hand side, will be really great. Would help me to understand if you guys have understood so far. So just to give you an idea, what are the elements of micro messaging is basically an facial expressions. So we can see various facial expressions which mean something. So every time we are sitting in a meeting or a conference, we send this kind of a messages to other people. So when you have your hand on the chin or on your cheeks, it means something. It means that either you're seeing with an interest or you're just bored there and you're just sitting there, or you're evaluating or you're thinking about something. Also other aspects which play important role in a micro message is a very important is a hand gesture. If you're pointing fingers towards someone, it means something. If your hands are waving up in the air, that means something else. So every time your hand gesture differs, like we can see in the images shown below, that if you're scratching your head, the meaning is something different. If your head is touching towards your forehead, the meaning is something different. But again, your facial expressions are also important. So if I'm touching my head and I'm smiling, that means I am positive, or there's something which can be positive. But if I'm touching my head or a forehead and my expression is negative, that means that's not something great job what the opposite person has done. So these are two major components of micro messages, and moving forward we'll have few more. The choice of words are really important. You can say, I really appreciate you. This is the one way of saying it, or you have done a great job, or anyway when we reply to an email we see the choice of words. So when somebody sends you an information, what do you reply is really an important aspect. So you say, okay, received. That is a choice of word one has. Or somebody says thank you, or say thank you received, or you name the person, say thank you Vaibhav received, or thank you Vaibhav. That's it. So every time you're typing or saying these words, they mean something different. So when you really appreciate, you would say thank you Vaibhav, I've received it. Or you have just noted, that means you have just received and it's your duty which you have completed. Or okay means okay, you have done your job. So every time we are using words, like with any word, they're really important. So the choice of words plays an important role. And tone of voice, that is tonality, plays really important word. When we are speaking to any individual, we need to understand our tone should be a neutral or as per the conversation what you are having. So for example, you're excited, and if you're talking to a person, your tone should sound exciting. It should not sound ki ha, it was, I'm talking about a movie, or you're talking about a project which an individual has done, and you are appreciating a person with a tone like Sachin has done a great job and I really appreciate Sachin, and I think he is a great asset to an organization. This is a tone which is a neutral tone, or which is not an actually appreciation tone. So tone should be like, wow, Sachin, you have done a great job, and we really appreciate the way you have handled the project, and you're an organizational asset. So these are two different aspects. How can you use a tone or a tone of a voice in a different manner? So that really plays an important role. Eye contacts, as we all know, during a communication, if we do not maintain an eye contact, it gives the negative impression during an interviews, or it can be during a meetings or any event, even in personal life. So question and interaction, how does that makes a difference? So when you are interacting with an individuals, we understand that what kind of questions we ask or how do we interact is really important. So there are two ways, either we can ask open-ended questions to an individual, or we can ask close-ended questions. If we are asking open-ended question, it helps you or as an individual to build a rapport, or as an HR professional, it gives you a time to understand the candidate. Same thing goes with the eye contact or a tonality. If you really would like to get maximum out of candidates, we should have a positive note or a positive way we are speaking towards candidate. And then there are other element is called unconscious, which is not based on any of the above. So for example, things which we don't like, it can be a color of shirt which the candidate is wearing, or the way he's carrying himself. That time your facial expressions will be like that. You don't need to tell him that you didn't like him or you didn't like his shirt. You're not, these are just sudden responses which would come out of your unconscious mind, so which you cannot control basically. So these are the major elements of micro message. One is the facial expression, other is body language, third one the choice of word, fourth is tonality, fifth is eye contact, questions and interaction, and unconscious. These are elements. So as I said, I have told you story before, how are this micro messaging impacting an individual. So the guy was waiting for a long time there. So the message which is a manager is sending to this guy is like, he's not so important, he's just another guy in my team who has to wait for me. Second thing, he is appreciating Jay and not appreciating any other guys. That means, he's a biased manager and others are not supported. That means this guy does not have any future. So day two, he has understood entire organization culture and he has made his mind, and he understands there is lack of recognition, there are no equipment to support, and manager has failed to connect with an individual on one-to-one level, which would impact an organization and also an employee's performance. So as we have seen in the case when Rita recommended few things, the manager said, okay, great. And he basically cut her short. So he did not listen to her communication or the conversation or the ideas. And same thing he did with the new guy. He said new guy. He did not know the guy by his name. So that is another micro inequities which we are sending. Micro inequities are the major things which causes a trouble, and other part is micro affirmations, which are the part which would help an individual or an employee to build basically his one-to-one rapport or an organization. So when the new joinee joins an organization and he would go or he meets any of his ex-colleagues, he would say, oh, this organization. He would not say, this manager said something like this to me, or the manager is biased. He would say, entire organization. He would say, Infosys has a biased culture. I'm sorry, guys, I'm using certain organizational name just to give an example. So he'll say Accenture has a bad culture. You know, the manager does not value yourself. So the feedback or the response what we are sending outside is about the organization image when we are sending this micro messages. So as a manager or an HR professional, we need to understand they impact organization in a larger manner. So what is that an organization is going to lose? Once you have micro inequities sent, there will be negative branding, as I said, the impact on individual as well as the team performance. Since you know the new guy already knows who the power center, Jai is a power center, and I know that even though I put on 100% effort or 200% effort, I'm not going to get recognized. So he's not going to put in 100% effort. What are we losing is an opportunity and resource which is going to cost high labor turnover, since all the guys would be demotivated in an organization or a particular team, and it would also create a communication gap since nobody would like to listen to anybody, and even the manager would tell you XYZ, you know that he's not going to keep his commitment. So there will be lack of commitment, misleading communications, and many more drawbacks which we will have because of micro inequities, which is a negative messaging, which is how normally happens in organization, and that causes a negative branding and a high labor turnover, or we fail to hire effectively because of that. So here are few things. What are the ways we use for employer branding? One is internal and other is external. So internal branding process is basically we use recruitment process for employer branding. We use induction process. You'll send this guy 4 days, or we'll have corporate videos and so on, just to build a brand within an organization. So we'll have regular two-way communication meeting from HR, or you'll have HR mailers, or leadership style plays an important role as well. So what is a top management doing is really important, or the way a CEO carries himself is an important to an employee, because he looks at a CEO as an organization, not as a CEO individual. So if X isn't CEO, he's looked as an organization and not as an CEO. I mean, he's not an individual for an employee. So whatever he says, he speaks, the way he carries himself impacts an organization at large. Our compensation benefits or L&D and performance management, these are the other external internal branding aspects which are used by employers for internal branding. And then you have external branding things such as PR, media relation, recruitment, advertising, campus recruitment, company's website, social media, or you have external websites like Glassdoor, CSR, consistent branding, or other consistent branding things which we can use through TV or any other media. So we would focus on first four aspects of it. That is the recruitment process. How can we use micro advantages? So henceforth we are going to talk about micro advantages. That is the positive side of micro messaging for employer branding and effective hiring. So how can we use it in recruitment process? How can we use micro advantages in induction process? How can we use micro advantages in two-way communication and or a leadership, or we can have an employee success story which would also help us in a micro advantages or build a brand of an organization. So moving forward, we'll understand what we should be doing. So what we should be doing is basically we should stop doing what is causing people to be overlooked or causing negativity in organization, and we should be doing things which can promote a positive work environment and help employees to overcome their fears or a negative impression which they have. So how can we do that? You would understand in the next slide. So how can we use micro advantages for employer branding? As a HR professional, we are seen as a brand ambassador for an organization or of an organization, I'd say. So we need to understand, as a professional, HR professional, we have to go beyond the HR department. We need to understand when an employee comes for an interview or a candidate is walking in for an interview, you are the first person who he'll be getting in touch with, or you're the first point of contact. So what we need to understand is the way we are greeting him does makes a big difference. So when we are greeting him, it should be a personalized greeting. So when you say, good morning Sachin, how are you doing today? That makes a difference. Or you say just good morning, just come in. That makes a difference. When you are addressing individual with his name and trying to connect with him, it helps organization or a firm handshake or facial expression which says, hi, welcome to an organization and we really value your time. That is a message when you have a smile on your face with a firm handshake and you're greeting individual with his name. That is the message you're sending. This is an organization which values people and you would enjoy working here. Second thing, a micro advantage we can use is basically understanding the situation. So what we need to do is whenever we are having any communication or we are passing any communication at large, we need to understand the situation. So I would like to give an example here, for of an Snapdeal. So if we know in recent past, Snapdeal has sacked 300 odd employees and they have been in news everywhere. They could have handled that situation in a better manner. They should have understood what employee wanted or how can we effectively, manage that situation rather than going it out in the media where you have a negative branding everywhere. So as a HR, we should think what is important or how would it basically impact a brand of an organization. So we need to understand every situation before making any decision or taking call because it impacts organization directly or indirectly. Third thing is spending time. So we need to understand before interviewing or coming to a judgment about any candidate as an HR professional, we should spend good amount of time and evaluating candidate. That is the one thing. Second thing, as an HR professional, as I said before, we are the brand ambassador of an organization. So we should spend some amount of time on shop floor, on a floor, and basically greet people individually, as I said. So when you're seen on the floor, it is really a big thing for an employee because I understand only time you see HR professional is at the time when you enter an organization and a time when you're leaving an organization. Only at the time of interview and at the time of exit. Beyond that, you will not find HR professional around you. That is what happens in the larger organization. So just to bridge that gap, we should spend some time on floor and we should meet our teams around, understand what are the problems they have or interact with few of them to understand if there are any challenges or there is something going wrong in a team or at that project level. So this would help us basically if to understand if there are any micro inequities which are sent. And also when an HR is interacting with an employee, it is a positive message which we are sending to an individuals. So moving forward, how can we use micro advantages for employer branding as well as an effective hiring? So when we enter a meeting room or any conference room, first we need to clear our filters basically. So our filters means our mind, our head, whatever we have, we need to clear. For example, you had a bad meeting and you're walking from that bad meeting to an interview or interview somebody. So you would not have a right frame of mind to interview anybody. And you see somebody who's not dressed appropriately or somebody who's being very casual, would not give a great impression of a candidate. So you'll have your opinion or assumption formed that this is not the candidate I would like to hire. So before forming an example, basically we should uh, clear our filters and we should not have any assumptions. So basically HR should have a clear mindset, or I would say, if you're perceived, the perception really matters. So for example, I'm perceiving the candidate as not so potential candidate. My body language would be at such, okay, this is not the guy I would like to hire. My body language or my eye contacts will not be there, and candidate would come to know, and effectively, the candidate would also not be able to give his 100%. And what will happen is basically we'll lose on resource which might have been a great resource or an asset for an organization. So basically we need to monitor expressions. So we need to be introspective when we are interviewing or we are in a meeting as an HR professional. We need to monitor our expressions, because if a small negativity or a micro inequity can basically have a big impact on an individual or a group of individual as an HR professional. So for example, if we are having a meeting with a group of individual as an HR professional, you're explaining them a policies and somebody asks a stupid question which we didn't like or we expect them to know, so it would be really difficult. So we basically need to monitor our expressions during a meeting or even in an HR interview. Third thing, we need to have a limited interruptions while at interview or a meeting, or as a HR professional when we are interviewing. We need to understand that an interruption basically can be a lack of eye contact or conveying message that individual is not important. When we are not having an eye contact, or you're answering phone calls or you're looking at your phone call, it gives a negative message and it conveys that an individual is not important. So ideally what we should do is we should focus on a conversation, maintain eye contact and keep phone on silent. This would help us to basically understand the resource, and we would not distract that particular resource while we are interviewing. And it would also give a positive impact on the resource that the HR is really caring and he is listening carefully to an individual. So you would not also miss on any points which an individual is making on. So it will also help you to concentrate better and get the best resource on time. Draw participation. So if you feel you have already sent in micro inequity and that is causing, or you have a you already have a mindset or assumption which is, okay, this is not the guy whom I would like to hire. So I would suggest that we should draw participation. We should ask questions which are open-ended questions. So which would help basically an individual ask his opinion, basically ask questions regarding an event or any particular project in detail. This will help you to analyze the candidate in a better manner. Basically, once you have sent in micro inequities, it is really difficult to bridge that gap. So this is the time when you can bridge that gap by asking positive questions or getting involved in a communication. So this would help you to understand if that resource really has the skills which we want, or this resource is not really the one which you would like to hire. Fifth thing we need to remember is we need to remain neutral during an interview. When we are conducting an interview or any communication as an HR professional which we are having. Because being biased is basically you're sending an micro inequity, which is the negative form of micromessaging. So any form when we are speaking or the way we are carrying ourselves should be neutral in a professional setup. So this would help us to avoid micro inequities. Validating communication. It is really an important point where we need to understand by constant response or asking valid questions, we would understand whether the person has understood your communication. So for example, there's a new guy which walks into the office and he's reporting to you, so you just tell him go and burn this CD. So he goes to storeroom and or anywhere and he burns the CD. So actually he has burned the CD, but what you wanted to communicate to him was go and copy this CD and make another copy and give it to me. So what as a HR professional we need to understand that whatever we are communicating is 100% received at the other end. So for example, when we are communicating, this is a major chunk or a major problem happens when we are communicating CTC part. An employee never understands what is a CTC, and as an HR professional, we feel okay, he has understood what is CTC. So many companies include PTs or you have gratuity, LTA in your CTC, and the major problem happens ki your CTC is 12 lakhs but your in-hand salary is 50,000. So that's when the candidate gets pissed off and they say, okay, my CTC is 12 lakhs but I'm getting only 50,000. So if you have validated communication or you have reconfirmed, this will help you to bridge that gap. Or as an HR professional will not have any gap. So even in a written communication, if you're sending out any message which is going to the mass or all employees, I would suggest ask somebody else to read it, because as an HR professional, we are the brand ambassador and we need to understand that whatever communication is going through us is perceived as a communication of an organization and not of an individual. Third thing is basically analyzing tone and the interest of a candidate as well as our tone of interest. So when we are communicating with a candidate, we need to understand the way he's speaking to us. Is he being enthusiastic enough or is he excited enough to join an organization? That is the one part which would his tone tell, and also second part would be his interest. Whether is he responding to the calls or emails on time. So this would basically help you to understand if that resource is really going to join you or not going to join you, and would help you to have a backup or would help you to avoid the disaster like last minute dropouts. So whenever we are speaking on phone or we are having a personal one-to-one discussion, as I said, the tonality plays an important role. So we need to analyze the tone of a candidate or a new joinee or an employee, I would say. So how would that help, and what kind of micro advantages we would have, or what are the rewards we'll have, are the following rewards. If we are sending a positive micro messages, people around us would like to work with an organization. It can be any organization. People will be happy to work and positive work environment will be there. So obviously employee referral would go up and the cost per hire would go down, since you will have an effective employee referral system and your turnaround time will be more. And it will also help you to reduce dropouts, since you would understand the candidate's psychology or his tone or the way he's infecting the words. It will help you to reduce dropout. And as we have a micro advantages or a positive micro messaging, we'll have engaged employees and the commitment level of employees will be more. So a positive work environment would be built if we are sending a micro advantages or a positive micro messages. That's it. Hope I have contributed largely or in a small way to your knowledge. Thank you for your time and thank you Sourcing Adda. That's it we have for today. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me.
Okay, thank you, Vaibhav, for your insights. I'm sure we all enjoyed it and we will try and use it. So thank you people for attending. If you have any queries, you can always tweet us. So yeah, that's it for now. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, bye.
You can also tweet me if you have any query or feedback on my sessions. This is my Twitter handle is Vaibhav R84. So if you have any queries or you didn't like it, also please tweet it. I would love to know my feedback. Thank you guys.